Okay, this is the last video for lecture 1. Okay, we'll be looking at the measurement of the rate of reaction. Okay, so the rate of reaction can be measured either by the rate of disappearance of substrate or the rate of appearance of product. Besides these two, right, there can also be other parameters for measurement, right? If the reaction results in a temperature change, then of course you can measure the rate of temperature change, or if there's a color change, you can measure that as well. But for all reactions, right, there would be the disappearance of substrate and there would be the appearance of product. So for all reactions, these are two parameters that you can measure. Okay, so for the two reactions on the screen here, right, the one on the left is the breakdown of starch by amylase into maltose. Okay, so you can measure the rate of decrease or rate of disappearance of the starch over time. Of course, you can also measure the rate of appearance of the reducing sugar maltose. Okay, then that would be appearance of product. Okay, for the second reaction, okay, the breakdown of hydrogen peroxide by catalase into water and oxygen, the easier measurement would be to measure the rate of increase of oxygen over time, and that would be measuring the appearance of product. Okay, so that is to measure the rate of one reaction, right? So if you want to investigate how the different factors affect the rate of reaction, then you need to carry out multiple reactions with different values of the factor and then measure the initial rate of reaction. Okay, so let me just give you an example to explain this. Okay, so imagine that I want to investigate the effect of increasing substrate concentration on the rate of reaction. So I will use the example of the breakdown of hydrogen peroxide. Right, so the substrate is hydrogen peroxide, the enzyme is catalase. So I would carry out this reaction with 10% substrate and 1% enzyme in a particular temperature and pH, obviously. And I would get this graph, right, of the increase in oxygen over time. So with this graph, I can find the initial rate. Let's say it is 2 cm³ of oxygen per second. After that, I would carry out another set of reaction, in this case using a higher concentration of substrate, 20% hydrogen peroxide. So that would be the graph I would get for the increase in volume of oxygen over time, and I will have a different initial rate. Okay, so imagine that I repeat this with increasing substrate concentration. I can draw a table, right, that tells me how the initial rate of reaction increases when the concentration of hydrogen peroxide increases. So with this table, then I can plot a graph to show me the relationship between increasing substrate concentration with the rate of reaction, and therefore help to explain how increasing substrate concentration results in the increase in the rate of reaction. Okay, so in order to investigate the effect of different conditions, you need to do multiple sets of reactions with different values of that factor, and to find the different initial rates, then you can plot a graph. All right. Okay, so since we're talking about graph, right, on the screen here you have two graphs with similar shape, but the axes are different. Right, one is volume of oxygen versus time. The other is rate of reaction versus substrate concentration. So when you look at graphs, right, I don't know whether the first thing you look at is the curve, okay, but for me, right, the first thing I look at is always the axis. So why don't you look at the axis and after that the curve, and tell me, or no, tell yourself, okay, you can't tell me, tell yourself what do the lines represent, right, for the two graphs. Ready? Okay, so obviously the line A, right, would represent the maximum volume of oxygen formed, and line B would represent the maximum rate of reaction. Right? Pretty simple. Right? So why this question, right? This is to show you that really, right, when the axes are different, what the graph tells you is also different. Okay, so that's why I said, right, the first thing I usually look at when I look at the graph would be the axis. I want to know what the graphs tell me, and that would help me to analyze the graph and the data shown. Okay, so hopefully that's a habit you have as well, right? Always look at the axis besides the shape of the curve. Okay. Alright, with that, that's the end of lecture 1. Okay, so do complete the questions. Alright.